So happy to be here. Welcome everybody to this, I believe, really important conversation, how to build resilience for activists and dissidents. And we asked the activists for their questions. And we have them here. There are 4 questions. And I want to read them first out loud. The first one is, I often feel guilty. I feel survivor's guilt. And I feel guilt that something might happen to my family. And the guilt that others in my movement are imprisoned and I'm not. And guilt that I'm in exile and others are not. The second question is, I'm having difficulties in my relationships because it is hard for me to trust anyone. Is there anything you can recommend for dealing with that lack of trust? The third question we want to dive in today is, sometimes it is hard to keep fighting with all that is happening in the world. I feel helpless and hopeless and want to quit. How can I gain hope back so I can also project it in my movement? The last question will be, how can I manage the imposter syndrome that I feel? So before we dive into this question, maybe we can just as a group of embodied selves here, just to get a little bit more into our own body. This conference is so much about systemic changes, taking actions, we look out. And it is so important, as we will see today, that also self-care and coming back to ourselves is an integral part of resilience and well-being. So just check for a moment, what would it take for your body to feel maybe 5, 6, 7, 8% more comfortable? So some of us might feel, oh, I want to uncross my legs. Or maybe you start to realize you want to stretch first a little bit. So just take a moment and just check, what would it take? And then I'd like to invite you to feel for a moment the temperature in the room and the impact on that on your body. Sensing the clothing on your skin. Maybe you have socks on, maybe you wiggle your feet a little bit in your shoes. And then just feeling the support that this chair provides. And maybe leaning just 3, 4, 5% a bit more deeper into that support. And then maybe let's all bring our hand to the heart and just call on something that evokes in you. It can be a person, it can be a pet, it can be a mentor, an inspirational figure, it can be place in nature. Something that evokes in you a sense of maybe comfort, connection, maybe warmth or vibrancy, or deeper compassion. Lovely. We might need to return sometimes to that centering. Okay, so let's start with the first question and maybe also feel, as I read the first question out again, feel that question in your own body. So, how can we deal with survivor guilt? It sounds like really pathological, and yet it's a really important aspect of human experience, not just for activists. And it sounds, again, pathological, but it's actually really deeply tied to empathic concern and also a tremendous amount of responsibility. So there's a place to honor these feelings, but of course we don't want to get consumed by them. So, Bessel.
Now, survival guilt is actually one of the first things that I came across in my work, and it wreaks havoc with people's lives. In that the love, the emotion goes towards the people who you have let down. It becomes hard to really fully engage with other people. You may feel guilty about engaging with other people because other people have been hurt because of you. And I've oftentimes felt sad for people's partners whose partners have been traumatized by survivor guilt because there is not enough love for the present because so much of the love is stuck in the past. And then the big question is, how do you deal with that? The simplest thing, the simple technique is EMDR. It doesn't cure everything, but it's helpful to just quiet down the impact and the emotions. And it's a somewhat overlooked, simple thing. But I found to be most effective, but that may not be always relevant for this audience, is the research that I've done in the past 10 years, which is the use of psychedelics. And in psychedelics, you can really go visit yourself, and we did some very serious research on that. And you saw, as you go back to the scene where whatever happened, you get the sense of, oh, I did whatever I could. I was such an ignorant kid. I did not know what to do. I was so stupid, but I was so young. And when you get, first of all, is a deep sense of compassion for not having been able to do more, and also a sense of your own vulnerability, but your openness. But what you oftentimes get when you get, like in regular psychotherapy, at the moment you start opening your heart to somebody else, there's another aspect that comes into your head that says, you don't deserve to love this person, or you may actually hurt this person again the same way that you have done it before. And so being able to talk about it is terribly important, but reassurance is not the best thing. Reassurance usually is perceived as, oh, they don't get it, how guilty I am. And so the only way you can really resolve it is to forgive yourself. Psychedelics are very helpful for that. The other thing for that is theater, to play it out, to play out the different roles, and to maybe play out your friend's role or the person you let down, and have that person articulate to you in an imaginary situation on a stage of, oh, yes, you really let me down, but I want you to live, and to exchange roles, and to not only play your own role, but also to play the role of the person who you have felt badly about. So these are some of the dimensions, but the important things, if you stay on one track of it wasn't your fault or you did the best you did, they'll say, oh yeah, I'll just comply with what you tell me to do, but deep inside, Dan's model of that little thing in the back, that little in the back of your brain that holds the emotions, and those emotions will be very powerfully coming in, particularly when you start to have emotions for new people. And so you need to really deal with the event. Finding somebody to do that with is oftentimes a major challenge. But our psychedelic research really showed remarkable effects here.
Wonderful.
Yeah. That's very powerful, Bessel. And thank you for moderating, Annette. Some of the things, just to build on what Bessel is saying, is, and you're talking about the hand model, if you think about guilt as an emotion that we experience when we care deeply about something, it can be a beginning of realizing that, okay, I have this painful emotion. I'm guilty, in terms of this case, survival guilt, because I care so much. So that's the first thing, to start reframing it. Then, in terms of distinguishing a couple of things, we use two words that needs to be differentiated from each other. And one is guilt, and the other is shame. And it's important, people use them in different ways. So it's not that we're going to say one is absolutely correct or the other, but shame is a feeling like there's something wrong with me, that I'm defective. And it's a profound sense then that there's nothing I can do about it. And from a developmental point of view, many of us, maybe 35 to 45% of us, may carry this feeling of shame, often from attachment experiences, because if you can believe you yourself are defective and your caregivers, your parents, are okay, you'll at least remain sane because you'll see your caregivers as being the ones who are going to protect you. So then you turn to shame instead of going insane. Now, shame is so painful because it's filled with helplessness. It goes underground, so we don't even know we have it, but it still comes up into our thinking process. So, if something comes up, you're an activist, your colleague was imprisoned, but you weren't. Your colleague was murdered, you weren't. You're now in exile. Your colleagues are still in the country that you're working in.
Or family.
What's that?
Or families left behind.
Or families left behind. Mm-hmm. So we want to really clarify that if there's already a feeling of shame, it can activate this incredible feeling of hopelessness that in some ways may have already been there. Mm-hmm. Guilt can be used in contrast to something I did, my behavior led to a really bad outcome. And at least it isn't as helpless because in the future I can do differently. Mm. Now there's the kind of guilt where I actually did something that led to something bad happening, or I'm just surviving, I didn't do anything, but my colleague had something worse happen to them. But helping distinguish those two is helpful. For the shame piece, if you do some internal work and realize that a younger part of us may have held on to a belief, I'm really defective, and the fact that my colleague is in prison is because of my defect, that gives you a very direct route, as Bessel is saying, to allow another aspect of yourself, another part, another facet of yourself, take care of that younger child in you who's already feeling that they're defective. Mm. In guilt, you can use the same mechanism, but it can have a different kind of flavor sometimes. And this is going to sound really bizarre, but guilt can actually have its initial impulse to protect you. You may say, why would guilt be protective? It's so painful. Mm-hmm. Well, you may feel so helpless, at least if you say you were responsible for the bad thing that happened, now you are in some form of control, even though it's something bad that happened. So one of the most painful states is helplessness. So we want to be careful that an aspect of ourselves is trying to actually protect us by coming up with the guilt. And in this case, it's a little different from shame, not that I'm defective, but rather I'm feeling helpless. And then you can have this older part of you speak to this aspect of you that's feeling the guilt and say, look, your colleague is in jail, your colleague's life is over. What would they want for you? Mm-hmm. Would that colleague want you to feel guilty, let's say, about having joy in your life, about having love in your life, about making love in your life, about feeling relaxed, about having gratitude? Is that what they would want? Mm-hmm. Or would they actually want you to have a full life? Mm. So then the dialogue, the internal conversation becomes, oh, listen, part of me that's trying to have me feel out of control, I need to go into something which you might not have thought we would talk about with guilt, but it's grief. Mm. So then you go through the grief about actually what happened. Yeah. And that you actually were helpless and couldn't help your colleague, or an accident happened. Now, if it was something intentional, that's a different sort of thing that you did. But if it were just you couldn't protect your colleague and they got imprisoned or murdered, so these are just some aspects where, and we can...
Another thing is that...
Different layers.
Here we're sitting on the screen, we're comfortable in this room, our frontal lobes are in charge, we're rational. Yeah. But when things get really scary, that frontal lobe starts taking a backseat and your automatic survival brain takes over, at which point you may do things that are helpful for your survivor at that particular point, but afterwards, when your frontal lobe comes back, you can say to yourself, that was really a stupid thing to do. Yeah. And that's really where the survival comes from, because with your rational brain now, you realize that maybe you could have done something different, but you were at that point in a state that you had no alternatives. Yeah. And so indeed, and that's why psychedelics and theater can be helpful, is that you really get to distinguish between, back then, that's the best thing I could do. Right now we're safe. I could have done something completely different, but you really need to meet yourself as this very frightened, terrified, enraged person that you were at that particular moment when you had a different brain than you have right now as you're thinking about it.
Yeah, and to do
you really need to
intersect
visit
here for a moment.
that scared, enraged part of yourself and say, I was so scared. I was so enraged. I lost my judgment because my primitive part of my brain took over. And forgiving yourself for having been as scared or as angry as you are becomes terribly important. Otherwise, you keep reliving it in the present.
I think the important point was the brain part that you said here. I think a crucial point here was, so often we look back, right? And we can rationally assess the situation and say, why didn't I do it? But the important piece is, as you both know so well, that the most primitive part of the brain, the survival kicks in. And reason flies off, takes
runs
over.
The show.
Exactly.
So just to build on what Annette is saying, and Bessel's pointing out, if you take out your hand model that you got yesterday, and let's just review this, what Bessel's referring to, and Annette is referring to, is you have this brain, and the thinking part of the brain is the cortex, and the frontmost part, the prefrontal cortex, is where we can hold in the present moment lots of beliefs and understandings and intentionally extract memories.
And morality.
And morality comes from there when we get, and also beliefs about yourself, the story of you. When we get to all these other ones about trust, about hope, and about the imposter syndrome, this will be relevant. But if you lift up your cortex, people used to call this, when Bessel and I went to medical school, just the limbic area. And now, well, some people are saying, don't call it that. There's an argument in neuroscience. But whatever you want to call it, let's call it the emotional learning brain. Ruth Lanius has a great term for it that way. But this previously known limbic area, like the artist Prince, it's in your thumb. And this is one that is learned from your experience and mediates in many ways the cortical ways of responding to what's happening below it, the subcortical areas, which include these limbic areas. But if you lift up that thumb, take a look at your palm, and there you have 7 fundamental needs, which actually explain all 4 of these questions that we can talk about, that Jaak Panksepp beautifully revealed in his studies of mammals. But what we're referring to now is that in addition to those 7 needs, you have the fight, flight, freeze, and flop reactions that are mediated starting in the brainstem. This is the survival brain. And so what Bessel is very importantly pointing out is that when the survival brain takes over, it can be so intense that the areas above it, especially the cortical reasoning area, which gives you flexibility, can stop functioning so well. You literally flip your lid, and in those moments you do the best you can. And to be kind to yourself, if you look at the studies of, I like to call it inner compassion, but the formal name is, in quotes, self-compassion. The reason I put it in quotes is because I think the self is much more than the individual. It's also our collective. I think it should be called inner compassion. But it's called self-compassion for now, which I think is a destructive term. Okay, end parentheses. So this field of self-compassion shows that for this guilt, this is a very important thing to do. And what self-compassion research looks at is when you can be kind to your inner life, number 1, so it brings kindness. Number 2, when you can be seeing the broader perspective, saying this is what happens to humans when they're under threat, they go to their survival brain. I'm a part of a larger humanity. That's number 2. Number 3 is to be mindfully present with whatever you're going through. So that's what self-compassion means. Kindness, inner kindness. I'm part of a universal whole of humanity. And mindfulness, which means I can sit in awareness and be aware of things in the present moment without being swept up with them with judgments.
But an important part of that also...
We have to move on to the next question.
Yeah, but it's still the same subject.
This will make the others straightforward.
And the important part is that you need to actually access that part of yourself under which these conditions occurred and feel how terrified, helpless, and enraged you are. When you have these deep experiences, you can have hypnosis, psychedelics, how you really feel the pain and the horror that you had back then, but your brain can become aware of, I was so frightened, I was so little, I didn't have the support, and you can both feel the pain and the terror of what you felt, but also get the perspective of, I did the best I could given the circumstances that I was under. Today, I would never do a thing like this, but under those circumstances, that's all I could do. And it usually involves an enormous amount of grief and pain. And you have to meet your grief and your pain, otherwise you shut yourself up. That's the next question. How do you stop yourself from being numbed out? If you block your grief and your pain, you get numbed out.
And Annette, I know you want to go to the next question, but just to build on one last thing.
Yes.
Jack Cornfield,
Jack
Cornfield, who's here, has the best definition of forgiveness I've ever heard, because I would build on what you're saying, is that with that grief, you then do forgiveness. And his definition of forgiveness, which is so beautiful, is giving up all hope for a different or better past.
That's a good one.
Isn't that great?
I like that.
Giving up all hope of a better past.
Well, but that takes a lot of...
It takes a lot, but it's Fred Luskin's work on compassion would say that this forgiveness is necessary for that inner kind of compassion.
Right.
Yes.
And it takes humility.
Yes.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Next question. So, I'm having difficulties in my relationships because it is hard for me to trust anyone. I'm having difficulties in my relationships because it's hard to trust anyone. Is there anything, and maybe we start with Dan, anything you can recommend for dealing with that lack of trust? And of course, it's maybe a question that hits home for many of us, but it's definitely a very strong question, very common question for activists.
Well, it's an interesting question for journalists.
And Dan.
I'm Dan, you're Bessel.
Thanks.
Nice to meet you. So, there's some beautiful, beautiful work on trust through Steve Porges' work on the polyvagal theory.
Right.
That'd be one place to look for trust. And just to say this, that the brain is always asking the question, can I trust this situation?
Right.
Steve calls it neuroception. And I said to Steve, why? Porges, P-O-R-G-E-S, why did you name it neuroception? It's perception of danger. Is it dangerous or not dangerous? Can I trust it or cannot? Can I trust it or not? So it is a cortical process. So now we're up in the cortex that is making an assessment. You know something? This is a dangerous situation, and I don't want to trust this person or this situation. So we wanted to start, especially in activism, to say that there's a lot of good reason that trust should be really given very carefully. And so not just say, oh, that's a problem. Unlike the guilt we're talking about now, we're talking about a fundamental human process of saying, is this safe or not? Right? And so when it's a relational trust, for a little kid in my field, I'm an attachment researcher, we call it epistemic trust, which is, can you trust an attachment figure to be saying things about reality? That's what epistemology is, how we know what we know. Things about reality that are true. So in a country that you might be living in where the administration or the president or whatever are making statements that are not consistent with truth, it's a violation of epistemic trust. From the very beginning for us as little kids, we are trying to figure out, can I trust that what's being told to me is true? So in a society where you're being told lies, which is all over our planet now, inside of us, even if we're not aware of it, there's going to be this sense of not trusting that truth is being told. Now, we have a whole nother part of our brain that is figuring out what are called social display rules. Like, how am I supposed to look with my face and what I say so that I fit in a dangerous situation in the case of this mistrust? So knowing your inner life, if you're feeling mistrust, I would say start with that rather than challenging it, but then see if you can build relationships that are really trustworthy. And as you feel that in your body, with this person I trust, I mean, to talk about my relationship with the two of you, we didn't know each other. Now I trust you because I got to know you. Bessel and I have a long, long history, and we
Good dancing together.
and we dance together. We're dance partners, and you know, so I feel a trust. But there are people you might not feel that way. So I wouldn't go against trust. But the question is really about I can't trust anyone anymore. So then, if it's generalizing for your family of people you can trust,
Yeah.
although I must say, when I worked in Poland in 1997. And we were working with 150 therapists from all over the former Soviet Union countries, including from Russia. They told us stories that even people in your family would sometimes report things you said at dinner and you'd be sent away to Siberia. So I said, isn't that a metaphor? They go, no, it's not a metaphor.
Yeah.
So trust is a very deep, built-in question that your nervous system is asking. And then to build systems of trust is important, but don't get rid of when you're feeling mistrust.
Yeah.
But the other side of trauma, of course, is that trauma brings people close together.
Trauma brings people what?
Brings people close together.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, I teach the Nieman Foundation, the Journalist Foundation at Harvard, and these war journalists, they love each other and they trust each other. Reminds me very much of the Freedom Foundation fellows who all live under different conditions, but you come here and you all trust each other. And danger enhances a sense of trust. That's the very basis of basic training in the military. You put these young recruits through extreme circumstances and they learn to trust each other and to need each other. And that is really what keeps liberation movements also going together, is this deep trust you have in your comrades, and everybody else is dangerous. And then nobody else can be trusted because they don't live in the same atmosphere. And then your heart stays with the people through whom you have gone through terrible situations, but you can't trust anybody else. And that becomes a great challenge. And you see this all the time, that the people who have gone through extreme situations only trust the people who have gone through similar situations, who have proven themselves to be reliable under those circumstances. And so the big challenge is, how do you open up your heart and risk to be hurt again? And that is, and knowing that even if I get hurt, I will be okay. But being hurt and being betrayed is to some degree part of life, but it takes a lot of courage to open your heart to potentially dangerous situations.
I think, you mentioned before in the very first question, you spoke about parts. And I think this is a very beautiful way always to understand and frame and navigate our inner experience. And I myself had, I remember maybe 30 years ago, I said to someone, I can't trust anybody. And this person was wise enough to say, good for you. And this person really encouraged me. So, find that part in you that feels that mistrust. And it was sort of like, instead of there's something wrong with me, I need to get rid of it, he said, and can you feel, so there's a part of you that has this deep mistrust, and can you feel that love still can shine out of your eyes? And it was like life-changing. And it was the sense of, our heart can be open, and there can be this discernment, there can be this part that says, I go slow here, I need to check it out. And then from that step, what you brought up at the end, slowly expose ourselves and take manageable, vulnerable steps. Yeah.
We all mess up.
Oh.
We all do things that disappoint other people. Like I've known Dan for a long time. I'm sure we'd do okay. But Dan could do something that makes me feel upset. But what I also know is that if something bad happens to us, I can defend myself.
Oh, you can defend yourself? I thought you could say...
You can defend yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's okay if sometimes. Every relationship is filled with...
Rupture.
we all have disappointments, we all have fights.
Yeah.
The question is, can we repair? And so the capacity to repair is the critical issue, not whether we get hurt.
Yeah.
We all get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a, it's so powerful. And Annette, thank you for sharing that, the personal journey part. And I don't know if we want to do this exercise here, but there's a simple exercise, I'll say what it is, but, where you can teach yourself and teach other people what a receptive state feels like, which is a trusting state, where you're turning on what's called the social engagement system, or you're in a reactive state of either fighting, fleeing, freezing up because you don't know whether to fight or flee, or flopping first where you collapse, and then fawning where you're taking care of an aggressor.
Which is a hybrid, actually.
What's that?
Fawning is a hybrid. It's a hybrid between first you freeze your authentic feelings, and or I don't want to do this, and then you activate towards being extra charming, over accommodating.
With someone who's actually not trustworthy, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the 5 Fs. And I mean, we could do a simple exercise if you want to, but
Please, 2 minutes.
The only problem with doing it is in such a large space is that it's intended to activate a very reactive state. So if you've been through some really difficult times, this could be very agitating. That's the only reason not to do it. The reason to do it is it's better to be getting agitated here and then work with some colleagues here or come speak to us afterwards so you can realize, wow, my nervous system was ready like that to become overreactive. But if
how long does
with
it
wise
take?
counsel, it takes about a minute.
A minute, okay.
Or maybe 90 seconds.
The nagging sort of like,
okay, you ready?
Which of the watch?
Are you ready?
Yes,
Should we do it? If you're really not up for it, plug your ears. But otherwise, here we go. So just get yourself settled. You can have your eyes open, your eyes closed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say a word. I'll repeat it several times. I'll pause. Then I'll say another word. I'll repeat it several times. And then I'll pause, and then we'll do a couple of other things, and that's it. Okay, you ready? No. 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 Yes. 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 Now take a nice deep breath and let it go. And try putting one hand on your chest and one hand on your abdomen. And just take some nice, slow, deep breaths in and out. Gentle pressure on your chest and abdomen. And now switch your hand out so the hand on the top goes to the bottom, the one on the bottom goes to the top. Nice deep breaths in and out. And now put your hands in whichever configuration was the most soothing for you. Nice deep breaths. And then when you're ready, take a more intentional, deeper breath. And we'll let this brief exercise go. And it's sometimes helpful, Annette, if it's okay to take the time, just to say, maybe starting from this side of the room, what did no feel like? Just shout out some words. Powerful. Disorienting. What's that? Someone. I can't. Conflict. Negative. Guilty, sad. Harsh. Scary. Abusive. Aggressive. disturbing, distressing, right? So you can feel, what's that? Stressful. And now let's do the same for yes. What did yes feel like? Sunshine, comfort, inviting, welcoming, seductive.
You're getting into trouble here. Seductive.
Wait, I can't say it out loudly. Made you smile. Peace, soothing, soft, openness, regulated. And they use it in interrogation to what they say yes to get you to and do the lot. Yeah. So in the brain, what we think happens is the no creates the reactive state, whether it's fighting, fleeing, freezing, fainting, or fawning. And the yes creates the receptive state. So the first thing just to know is that receptive versus reactive explains this issue of the trust. And this is the reason to do this. And so if you're reactive all the time, that's exhausting and makes you at risk of burnout. So this question was so powerful. Not the trust issues we've been talking about are really important, but it's also a clue. If you can't trust anyone or anything, then finding some sanctuary of trust can allow your system to relax, because a system that's always on the reactive no brain state, that's no state, is just going to be exhausting.
Yeah, Bruno, thank you.
Another thing here is practice. And there's certain practices that are very useful, like martial arts. Learning that you can defend yourself. Learning you can stand up for yourself. Practicing doing that. In our programs, we do themes from Shakespeare, where there's some very serious confrontations going on, and you take either position, and you say, I could yell, I could stand up for myself, I could speak for myself. It's astounding how many of my colleagues who are very high up in the trauma field and do very hard work are martial artists in their spare time. That's no accident. In martial arts, you learn to really feel your strength. And even if things are dangerous and bad, you can say, I can trust my body. And one of the things that happens when you do martial arts is you get to trust each other. And if you play by the rules in jiu-jitsu or aikido, you feel this tremendous sense of power, but also the sense of you and I can deal with each other. And those are very important techniques to hold inside of your organism, in your body. Yeah.
I think what's important about what you just said, for one, the theater, like stepping into the role and playing it out, as well as the martial art, involves the body. And this is, I think, which is so important in both of your work. Often we speak about mental health, and most people still think, oh, it's just in the head. But you both have really shown that we need an integrative approach, and how much the body or the embodied brain actually is, is not to be underestimated. Thank you. So our third question, the activists say, sometimes it's hard to keep fighting with all that's happening in the world. Maybe we all know that. There's sort of like a fatigue. There seems to be more and more turmoil, more and more conflict. And I feel helpless and hopeless and want to quit. How can I gain hope back so I can also project it in my movement? And before we go to, maybe you take that, I want to say something about a wonderful activist. She's also a scholar. Maybe you know her, Rica. She says we need to redefine hope as a practice, not a feeling. So we don't need to feel hopeful, but we can practice hope. And hopelessness is part of a cycle, and so is the renewal of hope. So we don't have to feel always inspired to inspire others. And there's maybe, again, from my own experience, and you probably have them yourself, sometimes when we are asked to facilitate something, a workshop, or we are teaching, and we're going through some difficult moments, and you feel like, oh my God, I'm so untogether. How can I be there? And you allow yourself to feel that vulnerability, and you just, shift the focus from self and say, okay, what matters? And you show up, and afterwards, people often come, my God, this was the most profound way I've been, experiencing you. So, but back to Bessel. How can we gain hope back?
Well, there's nothing wrong with taking off. One of the hardest things for activists is to take time off. Because people get addicted to high states of arousal, high states of wanting to fight, and fighting makes you feel good. And to actually allow yourself, I need to go plant my garden for a month and hopefully leave the fight for other people. One of the most powerful things we can say to other people is, I have your back. I'll be there for you. You take some time off so that I'll take over for you. And one of the hardest challenges for activists and people like that is to actually let go for a while and do something like playing the piano or singing in a chorus or go on a hike and say, the world is fucked up, but I can't take care of everything in the world and I need to take care of me. And it's very important to, if it's too much for you, to say, I need a break.
I don't have the capacity right now. Yeah, valuable point.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. A couple of things. One, a very important resource is a book by Joanna Macy that just came out in its second edition called Active Hope, which addresses this directly. And Joanna would absolutely agree with the notion that you have to go through grief first. That's in her work to reconnect. You know, and Joanna, she's a dear friend of mine, and Joanna, you know, really has publicly talked about the great unraveling, which the world seems to be going through, and something she's named as the great turning, which is how we need to ride this wave of the unraveling of things, allow them to disorganize, go through our grief, but then use this as a window of opportunity to actually transform the world in a positive way. So in that book, you'll see a great discussion of that. What I do personally when hopelessness is what I'm feeling is not only work with colleagues and friends around that, of seeing things, but looking at the definition of hope as when you can't see any other options. You can't think about them. And that's one way of defining hopelessness. But there's a practice that in our community we do called the Wheel of Awareness. We'll be doing it tomorrow with the fellows and also the Resilience Week. But you can do it from my website, drdansiegel.com. But what happens is it's a wheel where you have awareness represented in the hub of the wheel, and the things you're aware of are represented on the rim, and you have a singular spoke you move around. And it has all sorts of aspects to it that are fascinating. But in terms of hope, what I've experienced personally, what my colleagues have experienced, and what my patients experience is, in that hub of that wheel, which you get to explore as part of the practice, is what, when you look at a deep dive into this that you'll see in a book called Aware, you'll see access to pure awareness. And in that place, there's a sense of openness, of connection. As one parliamentarian once said when he did the practice, never meditated before in his life, he had never felt so connected to everyone and everything and never felt so much love. So I've done this practice now with 65,000 people in person. And one of the most common terms besides openness and connection is love. It's almost as if the fabric of the universe is in fact love. And when you speak quietly, as I've had the opportunity to do with activists, and you talk about what's really driving you to try to make this world a better place, it is the sacred devotion, sacred meaning something that takes special attention. That's all sacred really means. It takes special attention that is driven by love.
Yeah.
And this parliamentarian said he didn't want to share this with his colleagues. I said, well, why not? He said, because they'll think I'm weak if I use the word love. So there was a silence between the two of us. And I said to him, well, when you're making national law, you know, when you're setting up federal policy, are you leaving love out of the reasoning? So if activism is fueled by this deep awareness that what's really true is love, which includes kindness and compassion. And activists have the courage to care, fueled by this vital force of love. This sacred work of activism that you're all doing is actually a way of tapping into hope. Because instead of being focused just on a specific outcome, you are devoted to a direction. And even if, as I was talking to Joanna, who's
devoted to values, right?
Well, devoted to values that drive that direction.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Joanna the other day. She's been a mentor in this field for over 50 years in climate activism. And she said she's never seen so many people burning out. And so we talked about how if the brain is always in this state of that no brain reaction, people are going to burn out. But if they tap into the fuel of love, that is part of where you tap into, in this plane of possibility. It's a long story, but the short version is all the other options that on the rim of this wheel you can't think about are sitting in that hub. We call it the plane of possibility. I mean, look at the mechanism. And so what you do is people get reinvigorated with hope when they tap into this. So I do this practice every day. And if I don't, I can feel the hopelessness creep in. But when I access that hub of the wheel, there's this openness where all these other options that I never thought about were. So what I said to Joanna is, you can train your mentees, the people that come to her as a mentor, to move their brain from a threat mindset to a challenge mindset. And Joanna, like I and Bessel, likes to dance, and she's 96 now, but anyway, we're in the kitchen. So I said to Joanna, so I get up and I pick her up and I start dancing around. So I said, think about if your people you work with could think about a difficulty they're trying to deal with as a dance partner. And they would say, what is the dance of today? What's the music playing today? And I get the privilege of working in this field of activism instead of, oh my God, it's a threat, we have to get this one particular outcome, because you can't guarantee an outcome, but you can devote yourself to a direction.
And so the other one goes
I
with
have to
that.
stop in there because we have so little time.
What?
We have very little time left. And
But I need
remember,
to
we
talk about
wanted
it.
to
No, I need-
bring the audience
I
in.
need to talk about it.
Okay, I give you 2
And that
minutes.
is the internal islands of safety. We are more than whatever we are. Do you play the piano? Do you paint? Do you knit? Do you have a garden? Do you have a place that is not relevant to all the very important things that you need to do? Do you have an internal sanctuary? Do you make music? Do you go tango dancing in your spare time? Do you
Have a dog.
You need to have islands that are not affected by all the shit that's happening in the world. That is yours. Your music, your art, your painting, you're making furniture, you're doing stuff that has nothing to do with the great outcome of the world, but that is something that is for you to express your engagement with the world other than with the misery of the world. I had to say that.
Thank you.
So-
Valuable point.
Come here. We're dance partners.
We are.
When Bess and I always get a chance to dance,
And we do.
with all of the trauma in the world, Annette, to come join us. With all of the trauma in the world, it's easy to forget to dance
Yes.
and to enjoy
make
yourself
music.
and make music and have fun. Because you can hold the grief and the gratitude
And the
all
beauty.
in one mind.
Yes. Beauty and brutality.
Yeah. You hold them both.
And what you make.
Yeah, that's right. So instead of like collapsing under the guilt, like, oh, how can I have joy? You say, actually, it's because of the suffering in the world that we're responsible for cultivating joy and having fun doing activism and a sense of humor. Because otherwise, we will collapse under the weight of it all,
Yes.
right? So that's why we dance. Anyway, I had to do that.
And there's many ways. And to my mind, one of the best things you can do when there's a terrible thing going on is cook for each other. You're not going to solve all the problems, but you can make a meal for each other and eat a meal together.
Thank you. So let's keep that last one really short so that we still can address questions from the audience. How can I manage the imposter syndrome that I feel?
Yeah.
So everybody has
Well,
2 minutes.
The research on imposter syndrome suggests that in high stress situations, the level of imposter syndrome could be between 50 and 70% of the population is higher. Marginalized groups can have that. The society can give you messages. So when I went to medical school, 50% of my classmates thought they got in by mistake and that something's going to happen, they'll be kicked out, right? Because it's a high stress situation. So the imposter syndrome is a great way to wrap our specific things up because it's the same thing. There's a belief like, oh my God, I'm not good enough to be here.
Right.
But if you're devoted to the journey and not thinking about, oh, it's kind of like a fixed mindset, like from Carol Dweck's research, you know, I am this kind of intelligence or skill at art or whatever, but instead have a growth mindset, then the imposter syndrome begins to melt away because you go, I'm having this feeling. So when I got up on stage to do the burnout talk yesterday, I felt like an imposter. I said, you in the audience are the real heroes. And what am I doing here? What do I have to offer?
Yeah.
You know, and I felt that. So I had to have another part of me say, of course you're feeling that, you know, because you are, you know, someone who's not doing this stuff and you're trying to give some message. So there's a way of, in a sense, not taking imposter syndrome so personally.
Right.
It's a human phenomenon. It's not like a disorder. It's extremely common.
Right.
Most people have it, 50 to 70%.
Yeah. And we can actually, as you do so often, name it and reframing, saying, a part of me right now feels like an imposter, or I have an imposter moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very related to the fact we have social brains, you know, and the brain is saying, are my peers, my friends, my colleagues, other people going to accept me? You go, probably not. Oh my God, you're coming out on stage, you know, what's it?
Right.
So then you realize, okay, I'm human. I'm going to have this experience.
Thank you. Bessel.
I don't have much to say about it. If you feel like an imposter, just go learn from people who you admire.
Okay. Thank you. So I think we have a microphone. Is there one person there in the back? Can someone bring that person the microphone so we can hear his question? I think it's a man, you man.
Where's the microphone?
It's coming.
Oh, okay.
And
Great if we could have more
and
light.
please let us also know to whom you would like to ask this question, to Bessel or Dan.
Or you.
Or me. Thank you. Behind you. Would you mind to stand up? I mean, I can see you.
Who has the mic? We can
Somebody
barely
over there
see
has the
you, just so you know. We can hardly see in there.
If not, see if you can. Yes, let's try.
Who has the microphone? Is there not? No mic. There
I
was supposed
told
to be
there
one.
was. So let's go
Okay.
with it.
All
Let's
right.
try.
Into anger and sorry. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yes.
Yay.
I couldn't hear that.
What about when the trauma actually develops into the opposite, like into aggression and anger that is not controllable, especially for individuals that actually have the power to use that anger? I come from like the Balkans, where machoism is a very big thing among men, and I've seen all of a sudden when people can fight or use their martial arts skills to actually fight back too much against those who might have created that trauma. So what would be your suggestion into controlling sort of from the opposite happening of not really sort of curbing to the problems, but actually overreacting to them?
Wonderful question.
Happens all the time, huh?
Yeah.
Happens in relationships, of course. There's an enormous amount of domestic violence among traumatized people. And indeed, learning how to calm that down is very important. And the most effective way is breathing and learning how to really control your breath and to do mindfulness exercises. Again, psychedelics can be very helpful to bring down the aggression very much. And also identifying what you're so pissed off about. It's very important to really know what the source of your anger is and to not spread it around. It's what happens all the time with traumatized people. They hit their kids, they hit their partners because they're filled with anger and frustration. I think actually bigger issue than burnout is how do you deal with all that build-up of adrenaline that's inside of you, and you don't know what to do with it. And the answer is indeed to really, really understand what that anger is about and to what degree you blame yourself for what has happened to you.
And anger, as you say, what is the anger about? So often we say anger is often a secondary emotion, and underneath is often either fear or grief.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of reenactment. There's a deep grief often that...
Side by side.
Yeah. Shall we take the next question?
Yeah.
Right here in the front. Microphone to the second row.
But I just want to say, particularly among women, inhibition of your anger is not going to be helpful. You really need to deal with it and take your boxing lessons and feel your anger and know where it comes from. And if you get compliant, suddenly that anger will come out at unexpected ways. And you need to really confront yourself for what you are so pissed off about.
Thank you very much for the excellent panel. In today's, geopolitical crisis, with the funding cuts and with the massive increase in trauma, globally, my question is, how can we more effectively scale solutions, especially to those in polycrisis settings, in last mile settings, who don't have the option to come to an office or possibly to read the books or to take workshops? Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
So we have exactly 2 minutes left.
Well, I think one of the powerful lessons from indigenous teachings is that the healing from trauma is communal. And so it doesn't have to be where an individual goes to an individual therapist. There would be a way for communities to set up cultural practices within that community so that people can talk about their traumas. We haven't gotten into layers of memory and what happens, but 2 things just to highlight is if you get embedded into your nervous system in something called implicit memory, all sorts of feelings of helplessness or fear or bodily sensations of pain that don't get worked through and made sense of, then that's going to come out, like Bessel's talking about, in all these ways, so that you can have groups, large groups, where people can talk about those things. Now, the risk is, someone can enter a flashback, they can feel like it's not controlled. So a facilitator who's trained that way, a trauma-informed facilitator, can be helpful. But that would be something you could actually start creating in communities. Yeah.
It's a very tough question. One of the most puzzling questions for me is that we have actually learned a lot about trauma in the past 40 years. And as we have learned about negotiation and collaboration, our political world is more and more turning towards authoritarian people, and people are following more and more fascist leaders. And so people giving up their own responsibility for themselves and idealizing some people out there who will solve the problems for us. It is a very puzzling phenomenon for me. I really don't get it. Why? In many ways, the world was so much better off, let's say, in recent years than it actually historically has ever been. And as this is happening, our world is beginning to fall apart and turn towards extreme authoritarian notions. And I'm rereading The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, because the same thing happened at that time. I don't get it.
I want to end, the last 9 seconds are for me, to your question. What is also happening in our world is that we are more and more connected. And while on one hand we expose ourselves more and more to traumatizing situations and seeing what's going on, there's also an incredible amount of online resources that are for free, right? There are apps, Headspace, Insight Timer, 10% Happier. There are YouTube videos that, I'm amazed, that teach you all about nervous system regulation. So there is also a lot of free resources that we can tap into. And we should. We need it. Thank you both so much. And thank you.